move from this, before we go to lunch, we get to hear from one more speaker. And I would like for you to join me in welcoming Sean Robbins, who is the Director of Business Oregon. And for those of you who don't know, Business Oregon is the state's economic development agency. Sean, where are you, man? There you are, right here on stage number one.
I realize that I am the one thing that stands between you and food, so I will do my best to keep my comments abbreviated. I've always thought that the best way to learn something new is to ask a lot of really smart people good questions and then keep my mouth shut and listen. So last July, a month into my time as the director of Business Oregon, a team of us that included the Governor's Regional Solutions Center and this Oregon business plan set out across the state of Oregon to listen firsthand to businesses and community leaders across the state about what was happening on the ground in their communities, in their economies. For 7 weeks, we traveled across the state, 11 regions, and we talked to over 1,000 people about their challenges. And we left very inspired, a lot of what you've seen this morning, with the stories. We also left a little anxious about their challenges, but hopeful for what could lie ahead. Taken in combination, a lot of these stories do represent the Oregon story. But too often, I think when we talk about the economy, we lose ourselves in data and numbers. It becomes abstract sometimes, almost theoretical, numbers in a newspaper chart. We sometimes forget that the economy is about people, communities, and that when we do this work right, we have the opportunity to improve people's lives through the dignity of work. So as I met folks in Pendleton and Coos Bay and Burns and Astoria and all across the rest of the state, I couldn't help but be reminded of parts of my own family story. My grandfather was one of 15 siblings, raised in northern Wisconsin. He had a grade school education. He served in North Africa during World War II as a cook, and then ultimately came home to labor odd jobs for the railroads in northern Wisconsin. He married my grandmother, as you might imagine, who for many, many years waited tables as a cook at a steak joint, turned down sheets at a motel, and ultimately tended a gift store at the hospital. Not glamorous. And they were so poor, my grandfather was when he was growing up, that he and his siblings actually dug for clothes out of the landfill. Well, they ultimately raised 3 kids, one of which was my father. And he was the only one of the 3 kids who saw any semblance of value in an education. And so he ultimately went on to become a professor at a university. But really only because my mother worked the same odd job routine for 20 years to put him through it. But together, between my grandparents' generation and my parents' generation, they worked hard, they played by the rules at that time, and they moved our family out of poverty into the middle class within 3 generations. So it probably should come as no surprise that as we traveled the state this summer and we met a lot of people, some of which were here, as I mentioned earlier, and we heard the stories, I left, of course, feeling grateful for what my family had done, but I also left wondering, what would the stories be in future generations for a lot of the people we met? And what would our narrative look like, and how do we write that with them? That is our work, especially for the communities in rural Oregon. Special place in my heart for that, in large part because of where my own family came from in the North Woods of Wisconsin. So today I just want to do one thing besides getting you to lunch, which is filling in that question of how do we write that story for the next generation of Oregonians, that economic story of Oregonians. based on what we know, based on what we heard from Oregonians, and what our agency at Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency, can do to be part of the solution. And I emphasize part of the solution because we do nothing alone. We do it with other state agencies, but most importantly, we do it in partnership with folks on the ground in local communities who've been pushing this rock for a lot of years. And I think the question is what can we as a state agency do to help them push that rock? First, it starts by acknowledging a fundamental economic development truth, which is that most of the new jobs that are created in the average community in this country are created from the companies that are already in it. The data says roughly 70%, some says 95%, but let's assume 70% of all the new jobs that are created from companies that are already here. And so while a new business recruited from outside will get the headlines, oftentimes it's as important, if not more important, to be working on the 250-person manufacturing firm down the road and helping them figure out how to stay in Oregon and how to grow to 350 employees. I really think that there is, quite frankly, no better way to attract new companies to Oregon than to start by taking care of the ones that we've already got. At Business Oregon, we call this the Grow Our Own approach, and it will increasingly drive our state's efforts and priorities, our investments, our incentive strategy decisions going forward. Second, communities across this state, but especially those in rural Oregon, depend on infrastructure to be the backbone of their economies. We've mentioned this before. There's also a shared understanding between urban and rural Oregon alike that we sit as a gateway to Asia, the largest and fastest growing consumer market anywhere in the world, and also an acknowledgement of the fact that 95% of the world's consumers live outside of this country. So the small and medium-sized businesses and manufacturing firms in this state have an incredible opportunity. And businesses of all sizes and in almost all industries depend on their community's infrastructure for their supply chain and to move finished goods to market. But infrastructure today is a lot more than just about rails and roads and ports. It's as much about fiber and telecommunications, workforce housing as anything. And so Oregon's ability to grow its own within our communities by supporting our entrepreneurs and supporting our businesses will hinge in part on our ability to find new, flexible, and innovative ways to build a world-class infrastructure system. There is simply more need than there is capital at this moment. And we also have to make sure that the precious dollars we do have directly support catalytic infrastructure growth opportunities to attract quality businesses and jobs that come with them. It's not simply enough to ask the question, what infrastructure do we need? But I would offer that we have to ask, what infrastructure do we need to retain, attract, and grow the companies and the industries that we want for the future? And those answers differ based on who we think we want to be in the future. So with this understanding, the governor's budget, wisely, I think, includes $10 million in Business Oregon for a Rural Infrastructure Opportunity Fund, a fund to help connect the last mile of infrastructure needs to immediate job creation opportunities in our rural Oregon communities, a need that we heard time and again from folks on the road. And a small anecdote, we've met with a company who has operations in Nevada and operations in Oregon. We couldn't find the money to help them pave the road to their site in Oregon, but Nevada was offering to build a 26-mile highway and maintain it in perpetuity. Those companies want to stay here, and making sure we can get them that last mile of infrastructure to help make sure that that business stays here is critically important to growing our own. Third, so people throughout Oregon told us they also wanted us to accelerate the state's commitment to innovation and entrepreneurship, in the natural resource industries, as much as we've emphasized innovation and entrepreneurship in technology, software, advanced and clean energy alternatives over the years, and they're right. Because the advanced agriculture and food products industries and wood products industries of tomorrow are as much about robotics and advanced monitoring systems and data analytics as they are about board feet and bushels. So recognizing this opportunity, we worked with Governor Kitzhaber to propose a $5 million natural resource innovation fund, picking up off the theme that Director Koba mentioned in her remarks on the panel. It's a transformative technology fund that, in the same spirit as what Oregon Innovation Council has done to spur 90 new companies and create a 6-to-1 return on investment, do the same thing for transformative natural resource technologies, some of which we've had the opportunity to see here today. And if we're smart about it, and we work hard, and we stay at this for a long time, we can make rural Oregon a hub for innovation-based job growth in these industries. But we have to be intentional about making this happen. Oregon competes fundamentally on quality and on value, not on being the lowest price competitor in the United States or buying our wins with endless incentives. So we have to capture more future growth up the value chain in these industries. So in 2015, Business Oregon and the Oregon Business Plan will support a CEO-driven process to create 10-year industry roadmaps for these two critical industries. And these won't be pie-in-the-sky plans, but actionable playbooks with real outcomes, tactics, metrics, lines of accountability. Now, there's something else that stood out to me when we visited our friends in Pendleton this past summer. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it. But Director Koba kind of beat me to the punch. With all of this emphasis on advanced wood products and food, there's another industry, unmanned aerial vehicles, that could jumpstart rural Oregon in the coming years. And it's an incredible intersection of rural, urban, manufacturing, agriculture. And this isn't an industry that's just dropping packages off your door at Amazon. This is changing the way we do precision farming, agriculture, remote sensing, forestry, and public safety. And yes, that is a drone off to my right. And our friends from Blue Mountain Community College are piloting the aircraft right now. And as that gentleman who's flying it today said to me yesterday, I'm just glad that didn't crash or anything. As that gentleman who's piloting the aircraft said to me yesterday, Sean, I'm a second-generation aviation mechanic, and this is the future of aviation in rural Oregon. And we're positioned to do something about it. And he's right, because this is an industry that by 2025 will be a $90 billion industry in this country, and rural Oregon is uniquely positioned with test sites in Tillamook, Pendleton, and the Warm Springs Reservation to be a part of that. Now, none of the actions I've outlined here today are magic bullets unto themselves. Grow our own, catalytic infrastructure, natural resource innovation. But taken together, they begin to answer the question that I started with. What positive action-oriented steps, not talk, can we do to begin to move the needle and positively shape the economic story of Oregonians for the future? Especially those that have been hardest hit by the recession and who are still trying to climb their way out of it. Because an Oregon that succeeds in the future is one, I think, where all of us succeed from one corner of the state to the other. And we have done it time and again in this state. The forestry giants of the 19th century, the electronics industry post-World War II in the 20th century, the athletic and apparel industry in our lifetime. And so I leave you with one question. What will our 21st century version of that story be in the economy? And how will we improve the lives of Oregonians as we do it? I look forward to helping write all of it with you, and thank you for your commitment to doing it together. Thank you.
So we're going to go to lunch. But before we go, I just want to hear from this very frightened woman sitting next to me. So anything that's stuck in your mind from what you've heard thus far today?
Yes, there have been very fantastic ideas put forward. I mean, there are a lot of them. There's just recently mentioned And I hope we can follow those through, because for me, this is new news. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love her. She's my favorite person of the day. And we are going to go eat, and we're going to be back in our seats, please, at 12:10. May the force be with you. Thank you. Thanks so much.